Hey, welcome back. RJ Debate here. Two hosts, two takes, one tough question. If octopuses really have their own kind of mind, do we actually owe them almost human-level moral respect? Or are we overhyping an alien brain for clicks?
That is a big question. Also a slightly stressful one for everyone yang doyan makan gurita bakar.
Yeah, sorry in advance to everyone young lugging a dumb takoyaki. So I'll take the strong side tonight. I think octopuses are genuinely conscious in a morally serious way, and we should radically change how we treat them. Research, food, even the idea of farming them.
And I'll be the annoying skeptical guy. I'm not saying they're just meat robots, but I don't think the evidence forces us to treat them like little underwater persons either. I'm team high welfare, yes. Full moral upgrade, hold up a second.
Let's start with the wildest part for me. Evolution basically built complex minds twice on this planet. Once in our line, vertebrates, and once in theirs, cephalopods. We split from their ancestors like 600 million years ago when our common ancestor was basically a squishy worm with light-sensing dots. And then both lines independently ended up with problem-solving, play, maybe even subjective experience.
I agree that's insane in a cool way. Peter Godfrey Smith actually calls octopuses the closest thing we have to meeting an intelligent alien. So yeah, they're cognitively special. My pushback is alien doesn't automatically mean person. The architecture is so different that we should be careful before we just copy-paste human categories like self or rights onto them.
Sure, but that same architecture is exactly why I think we can't just shrug and say, they're just animals, whatever. Look at their nervous system. Roughly 500 million neurons, comparable to a small mammal, but 2/3 of that is in their arms. One brain in the middle, 8 mini brains in each arm, and those arms can taste, feel, and partly decide stuff on their own.
Right, the 9 brains meme is kind of true. And experiments show a severed arm can still do fairly coordinated movements for a while. Reaching, grabbing, withdrawing from pain.
Exactly. That blows up our default idea that a mind has to be this single CEO in the skull. There's a real possibility that an octopus is more like a committee of semi-autonomous agents, arms with their own local feel of the world, coordinated by a central hub. Some philosophers literally ask, what is it like to be an octopus arm?
Which is a great stoned at 3 a.m. question, by the way. But here's the thing, that weirdness cuts both ways. You're using it as, wow, plural consciousness, so rich. I can also read it as, we have no clue what kind of subject, if any, sits on top of all this. The more alien the architecture, the harder it is to be sure there's anything like our kind of unified experience.
Okay, let's get concrete. Take the coconut shell octopus off Indonesia, Amphiooctopus marginatus. Researchers filmed them picking up 2 halves of a coconut, cleaning them, stacking them, then awkwardly stilt walking across the seafloor while super exposed, just so later they can snap the shells together as a portable bunker.
Yeah, the little guy doing Minecraft base building IRL.
But seriously, that's not just tool use. They pay a big cost right now, slow, clumsy, vulnerable, for a hypothetical future threat. That matches functional definitions of future planning, representing yourself over time, representing future danger that isn't happening yet, and using an external object to control that future. That's not a dumb reflex. That screams model of the world plus model of self in that world.
I agree that's really strong evidence for complex cognition. I'm just not ready to say, therefore inner movie playing, therefore strong moral patient. Lots of evolved systems do crazy optimized stuff without feeling anything. Ant colonies, immune systems, even machine learning models. We need to be careful not to equate clever behavior with conscious experience.
Totally. Behavior alone can mislead. That's why the biology matters. They don't just have big brains, they also do wild stuff at the molecular level. Their nervous system leans heavily on RNA editing, rewriting the blueprints for neural proteins on the fly, especially in the brain. That let them adapt neuron function in real time to the environment and might explain why individual octopuses develop such distinct personalities.
Okay, for the record, I love that fact. They're basically hot-swapping firmware in their own neurons. But again, the skeptic in me says flexible hardware plus rich behavior equals candidate for consciousness, not automatic proof. It's circumstantial. Impressive, but circumstantial.
So let's bring in the emotional side because that's where ethics usually kicks in. In European labs, cephalopods are legally protected like vertebrates. Same directive as mice, fish, primates. EU Directive 2010.38 says if you might cause pain or distress, you need justification, anesthesia, enrichment, the whole welfare protocol. That wasn't done on a whim. It followed evidence that they feel pain, can suffer, and have preferences that matter to them.
Right. And later, the UK even officially recognized octopuses and some crustaceans as sentient beings after that LSE report reviewed hundreds of studies on pain, learning, trade-offs, and so on.
And look at those enrichment studies. Put an octopus in a bare glass tank versus a tank with rocks, shells, pots to hide in, textures to explore. They consistently choose the enriched side. In barren ones, they develop repetitive, stereotyped behaviors that look a lot like boredom or stress in mammals. That's not just stimulus response. That suggests internal affective states, boredom, curiosity, maybe even frustration.
I don't actually disagree with you there. I think the pain and valence evidence is pretty strong. They don't just register noxious stimuli, they learn to avoid harmful locations. They nurse injured arms, and painkillers change their behavior in ways that look like relief. That's why I'm team they're sentient animals. I just don't jump from can suffer to person-like status.
Fair, but once we acknowledge sentience, we can't keep acting like they're just exotic shrimp. Industrial octopus farming plans talk about packing thousands of solitary, curious animals into small tanks with low stimulation and killing them with ice slurry methods that are probably extremely stressful for a cold-blooded brain like theirs. That runs directly against what we now know about their minds.
Yeah, the farming thing freaks me out too. Even from my more conservative view, intensive farming for a species that's solitary, escape-prone, and cognitively complex seems like a recipe for cruelty, chronic stress, aggression, self-harm, cannibalism. You don't need to call them persons to say, this is a shit idea ethically.
So where exactly do you draw your line? Like, imagine a slider. On the left, rock. In the middle, regular fish. And on the right, human child. Where do you put octopus?
I hate this slider, but okay. I'd say far to the right of fish, probably somewhere overlapping with mammals like pigs or dogs in terms of moral consideration. They're special, but not at the human equivalent rights level.
Interesting, because part of my argument is if you're willing to put them near dogs, that already implies some strong duties. Most people would be horrified by dog farms and featureless tanks for meat. So if octopuses are in that neighborhood cognitively and emotionally, I think consistency forces us to at least ban factory farming and drastically limit invasive research.
That I can vibe with. My worry is more about language creep. Once we start talking about octopus persons or octopus rights in the same breath as human rights, I think we risk two problems. One, people roll their eyes and dismiss all of it as coastal hipster nonsense. And two, we flatten real differences in what their life is actually like.
Okay, but those differences push in the more radical direction. Take the mirror test. People love to say octopuses fail the mirror test, so they're not self-aware. But the test assumes a visual, face-focused, social animal who cares about its reflection. Octopuses are mostly solitary, their main senses are touch and taste, and their face is a constantly changing texture and color display. For them, visual self-recognition might be completely irrelevant.
Yeah, I think using the mirror test on them is like asking, can you pass an echolocation test? Then calling us stupid when we fail. It's a bad metric for their Umwelt, their perceptual world.
Exactly. So instead, look at what is ecologically meaningful. They recognize and remember individual humans in aquariums. Some will consistently squirt water at a particular keeper they quote-unquote dislike while being chill with another. That shows stable personalities, bold, shy, playful, aggressive, that seem to track across time and situations. That screams there is a subject here that has a point of view.
I don't deny a subject. I just don't know how unified that subject is. The distributed mind thing really is a philosophical grenade. If a big chunk of processing happens in semi-autonomous arms, we might be dealing with something like multiple overlapping streams of experience. Our moral theories are built around singular selves, one I that bears rights and duties. What do we do with a creature that might be more like we than I at the level of consciousness?
Honestly, I love that it breaks our theories. For centuries, Western philosophy has assumed a single, neatly bounded I in the skull. The octopus is like this living counterexample saying, hey, complex minds don't have to come in that format. And I think ethics needs to adapt to that, not use it as an excuse to delay concern.
I'm not using it as an excuse. I'm more like we need conceptual upgrades and better data before we make the strongest claims. Thomas Nagel famously said, we can never really know what it is like to be a bat. With octopuses, the gap might be even bigger. I want to respect that ignorance rather than filling it with comforting stories.
But that's where the precautionary principle kicks in. We probably will never fully know what it's like to be an octopus, but we do know they show complex problem solving, long-term memory, play, preference for enriched environments, strong evidence of pain and suffering, and unique neurobiology. Put all that together, and the rational move is treat them as if their inner life really matters, because the cost of being wrong in that direction is way smaller than the cost of being wrong the other way.
I agree on precaution for welfare. Where I'm digging my heels in is on the leap to almost human. I don't think we actually need that claim to justify big changes. Saying they're sentient, they suffer, they have a weird, rich mind is enough to argue for bans on farming methods that cause chronic stress and cruel killing techniques, and for stricter research rules.
Let me flip it then. Maybe the almost human phrase is the problem. What if the ethical shift we need isn't promote them up the human ladder, but accept a plurality of minds? In other words, stop using like us as the upgrade condition. They don't need to be honorary humans to deserve serious moral consideration. They can just be octopus minds, full stop.
That I actually really like. It moves us away from the vibe of, oh, look, they're impressive because they're kind of like small, wet people, and toward, they're impressive because they're not like us, yet still clearly have something going on.
And that has a culture angle too. These animals already show up in myth, sci-fi, horror, art, sometimes as monsters, sometimes as wise aliens. I think we're in this transition moment where science is catching up with the intuition that there's a real other mind down there, not just a tentacled prop for human stories.
Yeah, and that other mind theme hits home in this AI era too. We're surrounded by new, non-human intelligences, some digital, some eight-armed, that challenge what intelligence and self even mean. Octopuses are a nice biological reminder that our way of being a mind isn't the template. It's just one version.
Okay, let's make this practical. If your view wins, what changes in the real world?
All right, minimal package from my side. Number 1, no industrial octopus farms, period. It's just not compatible with what we know about their biology and behavior. Number 2, strict welfare rules in research globally, EU style, so pain is minimized, enrichment is mandatory, and only necessary experiments go through. Number 3, in fisheries and food culture, we move toward lower impact, small-scale methods, and at least humane killing, no slow freezing while they're still reactive.
Approving. That's already a pretty big shift.
Yeah, and we can do all that while still admitting we don't fully understand their inner life. So we're erring on the side of caution without pretending we've solved consciousness.
My version is all of that, plus a strong cultural reframe. I'd love to see octopuses treated more like we treat whales and great apes now, not totally off limits in every context, but seen as beings with serious moral weight. If someone proposed chimpanzee factory farms, we'd all say, what the hell is wrong with you? I think octopus farms should hit the same nerve.
And I think even from my more guarded stance, I'd be okay if society ends up there. If the science nudges us to say, let's just not industrialize this particular animal, I'm not going to fight that.
So we kind of met in the middle. You came in a skeptical guy, but you're basically endorsing a big moral upgrade just with more modest language.
Yeah, I'm like the boring lawyer version of your moral activist. You're yelling, respect alien minds. And I'm over here going, okay, but also let's write some decent regulations.
All right, let's land this. For me, the core takeaway is this. Octopuses show us that mind doesn't have to look like ours. They're distributed, they're weird, They probably don't have a neat little eye like we do, and yet everything from their behavior to their biology and the laws we've started passing screams that experience matters to them. Once you see that, it's really hard to justify treating them as just another seafood option.
And my closing take, the honest answer is we don't fully know what it's like to be an octopus, and maybe we never will. But that ignorance doesn't let us off the hook. The more we learn, the less comfortable just an invertebrate sounds. So even if you're cautious about big philosophical claims, you should at least be on board with strong welfare, no factory farms, and a lot more humility when we talk about these animals.
RJ Debates signing off. Drop your verdict in the comments. Are octopuses honorary persons, just very smart animals, or something stranger in between?
And if you're eating takoyaki while listening, maybe tonight's the night you stare at the plate a little longer and ask, what kind of mind used to living here? See you next round.